Do your project managers understand their contracts? Do they know how they're supposed to respond when there's a change or a delay, how that affects their responsibility to your clients, what it's going to cost your organization? The problem for a lot of construction companies is they sign contracts, and perhaps one or two people in the organization understand the implications of that contract, but they're not on the projects every single day, and therefore the people who are executing the projects and are bound by the contract that you've signed are making mistakes as far as fulfilling the duties of the contract, and as a result of that, you're losing money. My guest today is Josh Levy, and Josh is the co-founder and CEO at Document Crunch. Document Crunch is all about empowering everyone in the construction industry to know what is in their contracts. And the nice thing about Josh is that he has experience in the construction industry. He has a CM degree. He's worked for some of the largest contractors in the country, and he started Document Crunch in order to solve the problems that every construction company has around understanding their contracts. You're going to enjoy this conversation. It's very straightforward. It's very practical. You're going to walk away with specific things that you can do immediately to make sure that your people understand their contracts so that you get paid for what you're doing, and you're able to mitigate and manage the risks associated with every single project that you build. So enjoy my conversation with Josh here today. Feel free to share it with other people. And as always, thank you for listening to Construction Genius.
This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership.
Josh, welcome to Construction Genius.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Eric.
It's my pleasure. You have a very interesting background. You started off, actually, before I tell it, why don't you tell it? Tell us your background and how you got into the tech industry.
Yeah, actually, I'll tell a little part of my story that not many people know, but I grew up in the South Florida area, Miami guy. Went to the University of Florida. Gators, go Gators.
Go Gators.
I was a confused freshman when the university made us declare what our major would be. So I went to this little orientation, and the Rinker School of Construction Management made a pretty solid pitch around that time. It was 2001, that during the then boom in the Florida area, they had 100% job placement and were a very highly touted program. So I kind of made that random 18-year-old decision to go be a construction management major. I could tell you that, I guess, 20 plus years later, it was the greatest decision I ever made. And I'm not sure that I should take any credit for it other than just maybe being a bit hungover and making a pick of what my major should be. But anyway, I went to the Rinker School of Construction, top construction management program, really one of the top ones in the country. I did internships for a lot of large general contractors. And what I quickly realized, Eric, was I did not want to go be a project manager. I really enjoyed the big picture of the industry and the business. The day-to-day, I had a professor that used to say, to be in this industry, you have to love the smell of sawdust and concrete. I just didn't. But the business, I grew quite fond of. So anyway, I did what a lot of confused kids do, and I applied to law school. I ended up getting a scholarship to my hometown school, University of Miami School of Law. My last semester on campus, and this is the part of the story that not many people know about me, my last semester on campus, a startup emerged at the University of Florida, which was really like a predecessor to, I would say, a Groupon. It was text messages were just becoming a thing in the US, and they were using text messages for mass communication with universities, like emergency alerts for classes being rescheduled. And the way they monetize themselves were creating viral advertising responses in and around college campuses. So it's Slow and Eric's Pizza Shop. You could set out a text message, which was this very novel thing, an SMS message to 100 students and say, come by in the next 20 minutes and get a free slice. And just drive that very viral kind of mobile marketing that's now become a part of our fabric. Anyway, that startup was a few years early, but I had an incredible early experience there. I ended up rising through the ranks. I'm running a large sales team. And after a couple of years, though, I kind of saw some flaws in the product and decided that it was time to kind of get back on my main course. So I ended up going to law school. But I tell you that story because it's a bit of a bookend. Now, when I think about what big dreams I had back then, how cool it was doing everything, I was 20-something-year-old kid with way too much responsibility, just drinking from a fire hose and watching a business. When I started, it started at the University of Florida. When I left, we were at 18 campuses, and I think we had 75,000 users of the product. And so I really saw something go from nothing to something. It was a pretty neat experience. But I went to the University of Miami Law School, of course, graduated around 2010. And at that time, I don't know if you recall, but the entire world was on fire. The economy was in the tank. Nobody graduating law school could get a job, except in the South Florida area, all of the big buildings that had been built were now all in litigation. And there was a demand for one type of student, the type of student who had a background in construction that could go into one of these big firms and do construction litigation. So that Brinker School of Construction degree ended up being a lottery ticket for me at a time when like nobody could get a job. So I had a good early part of my career practicing in construction law. And I actually, this is a long, very connected story. I ended up clerking while in law school for the preeminent construction law firm in the United States. I was working for a then young partner of this law firm by the name of Adam Hanfinger. Adam Hanfinger, fast forward many years later, is now the managing partner of that law firm and is my co-founder at Document Crunch. So Adam and I had a great early start to my career. He taught me much of what I know about construction law. And 8 years ago, I left Adam. I moved from South Florida to Georgia, where I am today, Atlanta, to go in-house with an E&R top contractor and ended up having a great 5-year run there. Rose up through the ranks there, ended up running the legal department of a $1 billion+ business unit of this large contractor. Ended up being really overwhelmed with construction contracts and the various workflows and the day-to-day issues that were arising on projects. Hired my old buddy Adam to start helping me with some of that overflow work. And I just started saying I was a millennial, and part of why I left private practice was I hated that billable hour. I didn't see much value in it. I started challenging Adam to provide me fixed fee work and representing me. He started saying, oh my gosh, millennials like you are now running legal departments. This is bad news for me. We started just thinking there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. And then we kind of stumbled upon this idea of starting to leverage technology to amplify the types of things that we were engaged in on a day-to-day basis. So that's kind of the very long tail of my story, which then ends with me founding Document Crunch.
I think it's interesting, just a couple of things to note is just how, I don't know if serendipity is the right word, but just how as we go through life, if we have the right mindset, if we have a sort of a forward-thinking, energized mindset, that our career steps can very much blend together, even though we may not be intentionally trying to do that. We don't have a grand plan or something like that. But there's this connection that can be made simply because of the type of people that we are.
Funny, we've got a couple of executive level hires coming into Document Crunch imminently. And I was just having a discussion with someone on our team as we're just putting some people on different seats on the bus. So the backstory to that, and again, I don't know that I've ever told this publicly. When I came to Adam 8 years ago and said, hey man, I love you. You're like a brother to me, but I'm leaving. He looked at me and said, what the hell are you talking about? You're one of the most disruptive young lawyers we've ever seen. You can sell to anybody. Like, I was developing a nice book of business with him, and he's a bit of a rainmaker today. And I was a part of that early story. And he said, what do you mean? And at the time, and I was wrong, but at the time, as a young 32-year-old guy, I said, hey, I think it's going to be really much more interesting to be on the business side of things. And that was the motivation for going in-house. Well, it turned out that once I got in-house, I really enjoyed what I was doing, and I loved the craft of being a construction practitioner. But it turned out that none of that entrepreneurial spirit really is in that in-house side, because you're a service provider for a business. So Adam was dead right. I was actually wrong. The pretext for making the decision was wrong. However, to your point, but for me being the type of person that I am, I would have never gotten to Document Crunch. So I had a hunch. I was biased toward action. I took a chance. I actually was wrong, but without that, I'd be sitting down practicing law in South Florida right now, and there would be nothing wrong with that. But man, am I glad that I ended up on this twisted adventure that I'm on. And I'll carry it a step forward. We're bringing our whole company together for the first time in person in Austin in 2 weeks.
Uh-huh.
The keynote speaker of our first Crunch Fest that we're ever having is the Austin office leader of my old general contractor. Because, same thing, here's a guy, formed a relationship with him. I haven't been at that company now, and I left right before the pandemic. And yet, the relationships matter. You just never know when paths cross. I was just on the phone with this guy yesterday. I haven't seen him in several years, and he was so thrilled to be giving the keynote to my company about just what it was like to build his office up and what a day in the life of a construction executive is. And just really cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I know that you spend a lot of time thinking about the contracts that contractors get into. And so I'd like to ask, what are the biggest mistakes construction companies make when it comes to the whole realm of contracts?
So I'm a sports fan. And the contract, for crying out loud, we're called contractors, right?
I know.
Yeah, so much stuff happens in construction. It's a dynamic industry, and I don't know what rating we give this podcast. I'm going to assume it's not rated R, but stuff happens on construction projects. And who bears the cost or the consequences of that stuff is totally tied up in the underlying contract that governs the relationship between the parties. So going back to that sports analogy, those are the rules of the game. And I think, just like in sports, a fundamental grasp of those rules allows you not just to stay within the bounds, but it actually allows you to take advantage and optimize your performance. And I think that the biggest mistake that our industry has is that generally there is a fundamental disconnect between the very few people in the industry who actually understand the rules of the game and the vast majority of our industry, which just lacks knowledge around what the rules of the game are. And every project is like another game. And so that's a pretty big problem when you think about that projects are the lifeblood of our industry. That's how the industry makes money. Yet there's a fundamental lack of knowledge around the rules of engagement on every one of these projects.
Okay, so let me ask you that. What are the 2 or 3 repetitive areas that you see where contractors who are very skilled at building a project really lack the knowledge of the rules of the game?
Yeah, that's awesome. Construction is such a hard industry, right? So if anyone's been in business for a while, they're pretty skilled at building projects, in my opinion. But I think that there's a fundamental lack of understanding at the project level that, forget even catastrophic outcomes like, oh, you can sign a contract that will put you out of business, which is true. And I've seen it in my profession's done pretty well, leveraging that element of the construction industry. But much more insidious to me is at the project level, just the dink and dunk little things that happen day to day where you're just giving away money because you don't have a good grasp of the contract or you lack the confidence to leverage that contract. So it's a beautiful day in Atlanta right now. I'm looking outside, but earlier this week it was very rainy. Do you know how many projects lost how many millions of dollars because the teams just didn't give notice per the terms of the contract the right way? And now, fast forward 3, 6, 18 months down the road, retention is going to be outstanding. They're going to go to the owner and they're going to say, or they're going to go to the GC and say, listen, we were delayed by 8 days. Remember that rainy week in Atlanta when we couldn't do work? And the owner, the contractor is going to say, well, I get it, but per the terms of the contract, you had 5 days to give written notice. You never gave written notice. I know we talked about it, but I don't have notice. So I know I'm holding $50,000. Why don't we settle on 20? And that little dink and dunk, or another example, Eric, contingency provision in the contract. Okay, Mr. or Mrs. Owner, this is a change and we have contingency for this. Well, the owner's just saying, you can't use contingency for this. Save the contingency for something else. You're under budget. It's fine. Okay, well, let's just do that. You get to the end of the job. You think the owner is being very generous or judicious with the fact that you gave up that right earlier in the project? Absolutely not. So it's the $10,000 dinks and dunks, the $40,000 dinks and dunks. And that is just the money that goes out, but the friction that also creates between parties is really antithetical to a great smooth business relationship, which I believe is lacking in our industry at large as well.
Let me pursue that idea of friction a little bit, because I think sometimes that's one of the reasons why these dinks and dunks occur, is because a project manager, they may not want the friction in the moment. So obviously, you pick your pain in life, right? You either get a little pain now or a lot of pain later. And how does the understanding of the contract then help a project manager to go after those pain points and not avoid those difficult conversations?
Well, I think, first of all, there is this just concept, which is outside just the lack of contract understanding, which is to say, right, our industry is one, it's relational, and oftentimes you have people that want to avoid confrontation. That makes sense. But there's a fundamental misassumption that being a confident, substantively right, taking a confident, substantively right position that I believe, and this is the way I've trained project managers my whole career, if you understand this stuff and you can communicate it clearly, calmly, and confidently,
Yep.
you're actually going to gain the respect of the party that you're working with. And so to your point, it's that lack of confidence and that desire to not create friction that then just leads to like not wanting to push too much. And I used to say, I mean, that's the problem though, Eric. If I was in the room and the owner said, well, you can't use the contingency for that, I would just plainly say, well, section 4 says that we can use the contingency for this. And this is plain as day. Like, let's not make a lot out of this. Here's your change order. Sign it.
Yep.
That lack of wherewithal, I believe, that is missing. That's the missing link that project managers or project level folks just generally don't have. It's a lack of confidence and that underlying wanting to stay relational. But I think that knowledge is power. Knowledge is confidence. And I think it's winning, just like your leadership principles. It's winning the small interactions day to day, add to a compounding result over time and success over time. And when you come off as prepared and confident, and the party that you're working with understands that you're prepared and confident, guess what? You gain capital for future interactions.
Hey, this is Eric. Hope you're enjoying my conversation with Josh. Just want to give you a quick reminder that I have a book. It's called Construction Genius: Effective, Hands-On, Practical, Simple, No BS Leadership, Strategy, Sales, and Marketing Advice for Construction Companies. Go out to Amazon right now, pick yourself up a copy. If you do, you'll get tons of practical things that you can do to improve as a leader and get your team to improve as a leader. One suggestion I would make is that you purchase multiple copies for yourself and your leadership team. Read one chapter a month, meet for 30 minutes, discuss how you can use and apply each chapter to be a better leader, and see what kind of an impact that has on your business in the next 12 months. Let's get back to our discussion here today with Josh.
So let me ask you, Josh, you have experience working in-house for a large GC. And let's say you guys landed a project and you guys weren't just landing $500,000 TI or something. These are multi-million-dollar projects. And you're sitting down with the project executives and the project managers who are about to kick it off. You're the in-house counsel. You're the legal expert. You're the contract expert. What are the 3 to 5 areas that you're making sure that that project manager knows exactly what's going on in the contract every single time?
I love that you asked that, because I'm going to start this discussion, Eric, with while I was being paid to be that contract expert in an organization, I couldn't get to most of the projects at the level that you're talking about, which is part of the disconnect and why even the companies that are investing in these resources are still falling short. But for the big ones, I would actually go and do exactly what you just said. I would go and sit down and go through and talk about the issues. So putting aside like the nuanced issues, because some projects have nuanced issues, how do you give notice? What is the change entitlement framework? What do the delay provisions say? Those would be really the main 3, right? It's all about change entitlement and delay entitlement. I mean, I believe, and notice becomes the vehicle by which you have to deliver that. You have to deliver it, once again, rules of the road in the right form, with the right timing, and with a clear understanding of what's going on, again, to create a very competent picture and entitlement. And I would say that those are the main ones, but there's a bunch of other big ones. That contingency provision I mentioned can be a big one. If there's audit rights, that's one that's come to bite teams on the butt. Even just basic things like confidentiality provisions. Hey, make sure that your trade partners aren't tweeting pictures of the job site, because we're going to get fired from this job if that happens. By the way, I've seen it happen. And so there's a lot of gotchas in there, but the big ones really relate to change order, change entitlement, delay entitlement, notice provisions, and then I would say secondarily, audit rights, contingency rights, things like that.
So let's say a contractor is aware that they're not quite hitting it out of the park in terms of knowing what's in their contracts and using that effectively. What are the biggest mistakes they actually make when they're trying to fix the mistakes they're making with their contracts?
Well, that goes back to kind of what I was just getting at. I think that the biggest mistake, like our industry is very binary. And I think the biggest mistake that the industry makes is you have, in my opinion, around contracts, two classes in the industry. You have the over investors and the under investors. The over investors are the folks like these really big construction companies where, as you know, profits are shrinking. The industry is not getting any less risky, but we're taking sledgehammers to this problem, having big overhead functions, risk management, legal, whatever. And the problem with that, Eric, is exactly what I just said. You still have this failure to democratize that subject matter expertise to the people that actually need it to call the right plays in the field every day. So with the over investors, you're probably getting great assurance around, hey, we're not signing contracts that are too risky, where one bad thing is going to put our company out of business. So I believe that the over investors are very effective at, I'm talking obviously in general terms here, but my experience says that the over investors, they have these experts that are really good at protecting the company from catastrophic outcomes, but they're really not great at democratizing that subject matter expertise. They may do a training once a year where all the project managers come in and they're half asleep while the training's going on, but they're not really properly empowering folks to understand what's going on. So those are the over investors.
So let me just interrupt you. By democratizing, you mean making it easy to understand what's in the contracts.
Go find me the large contractor, trade contractor, or general contractor, where that contracts expert is going to every single project team and having a project level training in real time as the project's kicking off to ensure that folks are leveraging the contract right. And even if they are, now you have this dynamic where you still have a bunch of construction professionals in the field that do yeoman's work every day. You think that they want to run back to the back office every single day and tell them about all their problems? No, they got the rose-colored glasses on. They're executors. They want to get it done. But if they lack that fundamental understanding that we talked about, they may be making a bunch of silent mistakes that nobody even knows about. So you have like this disconnect between the back office and the field. So the mistake is you're spending a lot of money, yet you're not amplifying this knowledge well enough. And on the other side, this is less of the affirmative mistake. This is just the status quo, which unfortunately is the vast majority of our industry. Under investors. These are people that are using underqualified personnel to protect the company from catastrophic outcomes. And so they're just playing Russian roulette. They're one bad term away from some lawyer like me making an argument, which is a bankruptcy event for them. So they've got a problem in the back office. And guess what? If they don't have anyone in the back office that understands this stuff, they still don't have anybody in the field who understands this stuff. And so I would say the biggest mistake that people make when they try and rectify it, Eric, is swinging too far to that over investor side. And that is the sweet spot that I was trying to fill when Document Crunch was founded, which is to say, I truly believe that if you can build a freaking skyscraper, or you can do some of the unbelievable work that our industry does, that you can understand your contract. You don't need to be scared of that contract. That contract is not a black box that is too sophisticated for you. And the ability to empower our industry understand this without having to overinvest in it, and certainly without underinvesting in it, will make us a better industry. It will make our industry less risky. It will make our teams more empowered to make good decisions. It will allow for more aggressive scheduling and better pricing because we're not just putting unknown fat on unknown risk profiles.
Right.
And ultimately will lead to a more collaborative industry that can communicate calmly and confidently around issues and have mature discussions and better relationships. And that is exactly what we're striving for at Document Crunch.
So let me go back to this risk aspect. It's easy when you come to a contract negotiation, even the most experienced person can miss details at times. And, I'm 6 months into the contract and all of a sudden I get hit in the head with a mistake I've made. What are the non-negotiable aspects of the contract that you would recommend every contractor looks at prior to signing any contract? What are those areas you must hit and you must be clear on?
I mean, I think ensuring that you have an equitable or a fair framework for delay entitlement is probably the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. I did work for a major airline, and it was for a project like a airplane cleaning facility on an airport grounds in a very rainy area. The airline was non-negotiable that we could not get rain entitlement. Made no sense. I raised it with a project executive during the negotiation. She said, this is non-negotiable. So what did we do? We went to the almanac. We understood what we thought the likelihood of rain would be. We put a 20, 30%, buffer on that. We went back to the airline and we said, your schedule just got 3 months longer. And they said, well, why would that ever happen? And we said, pick one. You want no rain or you want shorter schedule? So the ability to understand and plan is really important. And so I would say the delay framework, going back to your question, obviously the stuff that relates to potentially catastrophic outcomes. So you're talking about things like consequential damages, subrogation rights, the insurance kind of framework, all really important as well. And then just making sure, I mean, candidly, that the team is aware of how to leverage entitlements because, again, it's construction. Things happen. Who bears the cost of that? Well, whose pot that money comes out of is completely dependent upon what levers you pull when stuff happens. But I would say that there's a few catastrophic type of things like consequential losses, waivers of subrogation, the indemnity, the insurance requirements. That's how you keep your company in business. And then there's the execution issues like entitlements for delay and then how you leverage kind of those levers when stuff happens.
What are some human elements that would cause you in a negotiation to think, even though the language of this contract is something that I'm comfortable with, because of the type of people I'm negotiating with, I don't think it's a good idea for me to move forward with it?
That is an amazing question. And I think that a lot of this tends to swing with the state of the industry, right? But I think, look, I've been very fortunate, especially on the in-house side. I came from an organization that was very value-driven. And I think that I look for, and look, I mean, whether I'm dealing with new investors or your customers at Document Crunch or strategic partners, so it's the same thing as we would talk about in construction.
Yes.
First and foremost is somebody who is ethical and transparent. If somebody's going to take a position and be arbitrary about it, that's a red flag. If somebody's going to take a position and be willing to explain their position on that position, it's a much bigger tell as to the type of partner they would be, which, by the way, sounds a lot like what I was talking about project managers needing to be like when they're talking through issues at those OAC meetings or with trade partners or whatnot. So having a substantive basis to support positions is important. Being ethical is important and consistent is important. And I think just generally being communicative is important. If someone, and when I say being ethical, the idea being like in a negotiation, like if you're taking a position, you need to stay consistent with that position and not switch it around at the last minute or try and leverage something else.
Yeah.
That's a big red flag to me. And in fact, recently had to deal with something like that. And we decided to not deal with someone who was doing that, even though it was a potentially nice deal for my company. I would say that those are the types of things. The great news, Eric, is, and this is, I think, also where project managers maybe lack a little bit of perspective. Once you're in a negotiation, it's usually because both sides want something to happen. And you should not be scared to be true to what it is that you're looking for. Generally, if you can communicate that with substance, you can figure out a way around it. I've had maybe 1 or 2 contracts maximum on the construction side that blew up over an impasse on terms once we were seriously negotiating.
Right.
And that's out of billions of dollars of projects.
Interesting. It's interesting how you mentioned the idea of the economy changing and that then changes even the feeling behind a negotiation. I think it's interesting for many contractors to reflect on how sometimes they get into bad contracts because they have to get a project. The economy changes. They want to keep their guys busy. They kind of turn a blind eye and hope for the best because they need to be able to feed the overhead and keep their guys on board. And that's when I think contractors need to be most careful in those tough economic times when you are feeling a little desperate and it's so easy to sign when you really haven't done your due diligence.
That's exactly right. And this, again, goes to like the fundamental premise of what I'm trying to solve for. If you don't have leverage for whatever reason, it doesn't mean that you're going to get some great new terms negotiated. But you better damn well be aware of what it is that you're signing for and have a basis to manage that risk. And I think that's what most people, especially the smaller mid-cap companies, totally miss out on, because even in the back office, they're not necessarily, doing the appropriate diligence that they need to do by understanding what they're really signing up for.
Yeah.
So let's use that scenario that I just gave. The airline that wouldn't give rain, that wouldn't give delays for rain. I mean, what happens when there's a disconnect and whoever figured that out, or no one necessarily paid attention to that, and they've now signed the contract and now the project's 2-3 weeks late or whatever it is. I mean, that's a really bad spot to find yourself in, and you've got a plan. There are going to be situations where there's gotchas in contracts. It's not preferable, but our industry also is sometimes unnecessarily adversarial too. And so you have to understand and plan for these things. There's no longer an excuse to bury your head in the sand and be willfully ignorant, especially when I hope that we're providing ways to provide more transparency into what's otherwise traditionally been considered to be a confusing process.
In your mind, if you don't have an answer, this is fine. Like when, let's say you're engaging in for what your company would be a significant project, there is significant risk involved. Obviously, you're willing to embrace that because that's part of the gig of being in construction. How much time should a company take in reviewing the documents, the contracts, before making any commitments?
That was the precise workflow that got me to have to need help from my old buddy Adam at my firm, right? You're going 1 for 3, 1 for 4, 1 for 5 on bids to one contract. You've got to put that high level set of eyes on it because of things like the schedule and the price that may need to change to accommodate for the risks that I'm talking about, which is you can't take out your bloody red pen at the bid stage and bleed all over a contract. But I think it's a fair point to say, hey, this price considers the assumption that we should be reasonably entitled to weather events in one of the rainiest cities in the entire country.
Yeah.
If not, we'll talk about how the price and schedule may need to change.
Yeah. Okay. I get that. So let's say I've signed the document, or I've signed the contract rather. I'm in the middle of the project. I noticed some provisions that I hadn't noticed. What can I do in your experience there? What can I do to address that so that I'm not damaged in a significant way?
The beauty of America, one of the beauties of America is that we tend to honor the agreements that parties enter into. So you're not going to get any sympathy from the world in this environment or in this society around, whoops, I signed up for something. So you don't get to back out of it.
Yeah.
The question and point is, how quickly can you wrap your head around it and make plans to mitigate it? And that goes back to, you'd rather do that at the bid phase before you've committed to price and schedule. You'd rather do that at the bid phase than you would after the contract's been signed and you've already kind of set up your deal, right?
Yep.
I know a lot of owners or construction leaders that have probably P&L responsibility listen to this podcast. Nobody likes a bust in their budget. So getting your arms around what it takes to deal with that risk as early as possible is important.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit more about Document Crunch, Josh. Tell us a little bit more about how you're helping the construction industry address some of these challenges that we've been talking about here today.
Yeah, thanks for that. The core mission that we're on is to really empower everybody in the industry to understand what's in their contracts. And when I say everybody, I mean everybody. So that is the back office and that is the folks in the field. And basically, we make construction contracts much easier to understand for everyone, presented to you in a way that it's easy to navigate, to have some context around it, etc. And my hope and belief is that the byproduct of what we are doing is allowing this industry to be better, to be smarter, to be better at managing risk, and to ultimately be more profitable. That's what we're really going for. And that's what Document Crunch is waking up doing every single day. There's a lot of nuance to where we are going to be able to use, data to drive better decisions, to help automate some of these project management workflows so that we're relying on humans to get this right every time. But the core value of what we are doing, again, is to take what has otherwise been perceived to be this painful, long, hard to understand process only reserved for the suits in the back office and crack it open and make it easy and digestible and manageable for everyone in the industry.
That's tremendous. How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there. Document Crunch is available at www.documentcrunch.com. And yeah, look, it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey so far. And I'd like to think that the leaders in these organizations are seeing how when their folks are a little bit more empowered, a little bit more educated, good things are happening, right? Let's go on offense and be a better industry, not always be so defensive about everything.
That's tremendous. And last question here. I know you're in the Atlanta area there. So if I'm visiting Atlanta, what's the one restaurant I should hit?
Wow.
That's a tough one.
Atlanta is a wonderful, wonderful town with wonderful restaurants. I'm going to take my favorite neighborhood place, which is in the burbs, and say that Thai food and sushi is outstanding. But there's going to be a lot of people out there that are like Atlanta people that are like, what the heck is this guy talking about? So there's a bunch of other really great restaurants as well in town. And it's definitely a good food town, though I miss my hometown of Miami's food.
Yes.
Really, really awesome.
So did you say the Tycoon and Sushi Bar in Atlanta?
That's right.
Awesome. We'll put the links in the show notes. So if people want to hit that up, they can hit it when they're in town and make a trip out to the suburbs.
I hope I get a free pad thai and a nice spicy tuna roll compliment to my favorite restaurant. I hope they're listening to this. I don't know if they are, though.
Yeah, right. There you go, Josh. Appreciate you joining Construction Genius here today, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks so much, Eric.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Josh. And make sure you check out his website at documentcrunch.com. Before you bounce for the day, I'd like to make a request. Please give Construction Genius a rating or a review wherever you get your podcasts. And that helps the show to be seen across the interwebs. We're looking to make sure that we impact as many construction professionals positive way as possible. And that comes through reviews and you sharing the show and all of that awesome stuff. Thanks again for listening today, and I'll catch you on the next episode.